Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 6 Ways to Set Expectations for Your Employees. Our presenter today is Marcy Bach-Eastley, who is a consultant here at CPS HR Consulting. Today's session is being recorded. We will post the slide deck and link to the session recording on the webinars page of our website as soon as they are available. Please check for these resources at www.cpshr.us/about/events/webinars. To ensure a high-quality recording, all are in listen-only mode. Please be sure to keep your line muted to avoid interruptions to the presentation. If you have questions for the presenter, please enter them in the webinar Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. We will address the questions at the end of the presentation as time allows. And now, Marcy?
Okay, right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Great. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm very excited today to talk to you about 6 ways to set expectations for your employees who are working from home. We are living in a different world right now from a lot of different aspects, both personal and work. Whether you've been a manager for years or like me for decades, or are a relatively new manager, your role as a manager has likely changed. You went from managing people located in a single space or perhaps co-located in a few connected spaces to working from your own home and managing who are now each working from their individual home. Working from home comes with many changes for both you and your employees, and setting expectations can help maintain work continuity and make the transition easier for everyone. What I'm hoping to do today is to speak to you from the voice of experience. I've been working at home for more than 15 years, most of the time as a remote manager, managing people who are remote. What I'm going to be doing today is sharing my own experiences. I know firsthand that trying to manage people remotely can feel overwhelming, and I want you to know that that's completely normal. It's not just you. So by sharing some of the common things that I have experienced that you might experience as a remote manager, I want to give you an idea or two about how you can specifically address setting expectations. What I'm looking to provide to you are some best practices and things that I actually do. So I think we should start with understanding your new situation. And my goal in doing this is not to paint a bleak picture or to increase anxieties in any way, but I think it's helpful to understand the new things you need to consider when managing people, and specifically when managing expectations of your employees who are working remotely. So, first and foremost, everyone is at home. Both you and your employees are dealing with all types of new things because everyone's office or workspace is now in their home. There are likely many more things that are happening in your home and the homes of your employees than what happens in your office, and completely different things. There are new distractions, there are new beings, whether human or fur-covered, likely present that aren't typically present in the workplace. There are probably new demands on everyone, and there's a lot of overlap of home and work that you likely have never experienced before. Working now in your own home and then trying to have work occur in the homes of your employees. Your employees and you used to have separation and the ability to focus on work while being at work or being in your office. And now you have many more things that you need to consider, especially when we're setting expectations. Work tasks have also changed. In some cases, work tasks have changed simply by virtue of being at home. Working from home means different ways of working for everyone, including new ways that we have to go about managing people. Both ourselves and our employees, people have to navigate work in new ways. Likely we have to do new things or do old things in new ways. And so there's new learning curves that we have to both deal with ourselves as well as to be mindful of in trying to get work done. And, it's a lot to consider and manage, especially as you're attempting to conduct your own work as well. Working remotely is a change for everyone. And, on top of everything else, your team is going to be looking for you for guidance. And, aside from the anxiety and concerns we all currently have in our daily lives, your staff is likely now worried about how they're going to do their jobs in this new way. So what can you do? How can you use and manage expectations in this new work from home world that we're in? What I'm hoping to do today is to give you 6 ways that you can set expectations with your staff to help everyone work effectively and keep your team aligned and connected as you move into this world of remote work. So number 1 is to address individual needs. Before discussing and determining expectations, you really need to know the situation of each of your team members, what their situation is at home. This was true even when I was managing people remotely before we were in our current situation, current world circumstances. But it's important to schedule some time to talk to each of your employees and understand their individual situation. Especially now we're in unique times, so it's likely that each of your employees will have slightly different situations. Everyone's home situation is likely different. And, we have to be realistic in recognizing that even what their situation is today could change without much notice. I think when we're talking with our individual employees, it's really important to be mindful and empathetic, as likely similar to many of you, your employees are dealing with things that didn't previously occur when working in the office. There are likely distractions at home that didn't occur in the office. They may or may not have a good dedicated workspace, and there's additional demands during the day. Everyone is doing the best they can to find a space in their home to work, but it might not be ideal. It likely is not going to be as conducive to working as perhaps their space was in the office. And like I said, there's certainly other things that are happening in their workspace now, since it's their home, that they didn't have working in the office. We also need to think about flexibility. There are so many things that are changing, so we need to be talking to people and thinking about flexibility to address their individual needs, whether that be illness or distractions, or just being able to work around the things that are happening in their homes that our employees didn't need to work around before. Number 2 is about setting expectations for availability and response. It's important to clearly define expectations for when people are going to be available and how they're going to respond. So establish clearly defined working hours with each of your employees. While you may need to be more flexible with what these hours are, given particular situations, perhaps your employees now need to start later than they would have started when they were physically in the office, or they might need to accommodate things happening in their homes where they need perhaps slightly different hours for different days of the week. They can't provide the same level of consistency of start times and end times. So you might need to look at different hours for different days, or some of them might even need interrupted hours, work a certain time, take a little time off, especially if they have children at home that they're trying to take care of, or school. We need to look at availability different, but regardless of what that is, you need to clearly articulate and make sure that each of your employees know when you expect them to be working. And while we are in very challenging times, we still have to, as managers, balance our employee situations with maintaining business continuity. So One of the things that I find extremely helpful with this is I will maintain a team calendar detailing everybody's availability. So on this team calendar, I will list all of the different members of the teams and what their working hours are. What using this team calendar approach does is it helps you to manage time, again, to ensure that business continuity and that work is getting done as your team needs to get it done. It also helps to reiterate your expectations to your employees about when you expect them to be working. And finally, it helps others on the team know when their teammates are available. You also, as part of this, need to clearly set expectations for how people need to be available during work hours. You know, do you expect them to be available via online chat or answering emails within a certain amount of time, available for phone calls or available for video calls? What are your expectations for how people need to be available? I have worked for managers who expected all calls to be video calls. So we just knew that one of the expectations was when calls were scheduled with this individual, we needed to be camera ready for video calls. What's important here, though, is to be clear on what you mean by availability during working hours. You also should include your expectations about how people are going to indicate when they are or are not available. So a lot of the technology tools that we're using for communication while working remotely have built-in abilities to let other people know your availability. So in most of the online chat tools, you can set it as green, I'm available, or in a meeting or not available. So you should set expectations with your employees about how you want them to use those indicators. And you should also let them know how you want to be notified in the event that they're not going to be available for some unexpected reason. Sort of tied into that is you should also set expectations with your employees about how you can reach people and how they can reach you when they appear unavailable. So if for some reason during expected working hours, somebody appears unavailable and you really need to get in touch with them, you should set expectations about whether it means calling their cell phone or calling the landline, or if they have one, or something else. And you should set expectations for your employees in terms of getting in touch with you as well. Number 3 is to establish regular check-ins. So determine how you're going to handle regular check-ins with your employees. Likely you had some type of check-ins with your employees when you were in the office, but now regular check-ins become vitally important. Especially in this time of isolation, it's more important than ever that we connect. So I recommend at a minimum weekly calls with each employee individually, even if it's only 15 minutes. Now, I understand, I have been in situations where I have had extremely large teams, or I've had multiple level teams that I've managed that weekly may be challenging. I suggest that you set a goal of weekly with each employee. If that's not feasible, try to figure out how to do it as frequently as possible. At one point in time, I had different schedules for my direct reports versus members of the team that were perhaps skip levels or something like that. But it is really important that you do try to connect with each person individually for an actual conversation. I also think it's important, as you're working remotely, to try to use video to do that as often as possible. But if not video, definitely live conversations. You also should be creating processes for other types of updates. So if you didn't have processes in place before for projects, you want to make sure that you use project management approaches for project updates. If you've had them in place, you may want to increase their frequency. You should probably set team-based updates. So whether those are verbal check-ins that happen during your, weekly meetings, but you should put some processes in place for how you're going to get regular updates on activities. And then one of the things that I do that I find very helpful is I ask for weekly written updates from each of my employees. So this is a set format that I ask each employee to just submit to me in writing via email at the end of the week. And it just asks for, basically 5 pieces of information. 1 is, what have you done this week? 2 is, what are you planning to do next week? 3 is, what challenges are you experiencing? 4 is, what can I do to help? And then I always like to add a 5th one that is, and please tell me something you'd like to celebrate this week. What this weekly written update does is, besides giving me an update of what my employees have done for the week, it also helps to keep employees accountable, on track, and gives me an easy way to figure out how I prioritize things, if I need to reprioritize things, and to address challenges that my team might be having. The important thing, if you decide to do these weekly updates from each employee, is that if you're going to ask for them, then you need to make sure that you acknowledge receipt of them and that you respond to them in a timely manner. Number 4 is that it is important to remember that there are still consequences for performance issues. So working remotely, even in our current circumstance, doesn't mean that we don't still need to work and meet commitments. Being empathetic and flexible and kind and patient does not eliminate the need for us to manage performance situations. You still, even when working remotely, need to set parameters and be clear about the consequences for non-performance. My experience has shown that in most cases, you should still be using the same performance management approaches and definitely processes that you use when working in the office. What has changed now is you may need to more clearly articulate consequences that align with the new things you're expecting. So things such as availability and contact, or the fact that we are expecting people to work more independently. So what you need to do is you need to clearly state to your employees what they can expect as consequences for not being available during your agreed upon work hours, or not getting work done when they've committed to do so. Again, using the same performance management approaches and processes that your organization has in place is important. What this means is that you also need to think about clearly setting expectations for consequences for the new things, or the fact that you are not going to be physically present while people are getting work done. Number 5 is setting delivery expectations collaboratively. So whether your team is project team, we all have deliverables that we need to provide as part of our work. And so I recommend and do this all the time, which realistic expectations for when work can be completed. Things, we need to be realistic. Things may need to shift due to the unusual circumstances we're in. The fact that our teams have new learning curves for, using technology, whether it's using new technology or using technology in different ways. We're asking people to work in new ways and perhaps even giving them new work that needs to be done. So they're going to need to learn how to do that before they can actually start doing some of that. So I recommend working with your team to understand their challenges and to look to see where you have opportunities to shift or realign priorities. My experience, as I'm sure is the experience with most, if not all of you, is that it's really just not productive to push unrealistic expectations, as nobody's going to be able to be successful with that. So if in talking with your team and working with them collaboratively, if they're facing challenges in meeting current delivery expectations, it's really important to work with them to find alternative options. And then, once you figure out what to do, once you set realistic expectations in collaboration with your team, then it's completely reasonable to expect your employees to meet those new expectations. But it's important that we set people up for success. And then number 6, probably what I think is the most important. You know, the most important thing you can do when managing remote employees is communicate with them. Communicate with them again, communicate with them more, and again and again. The more you communicate, the better. So in terms of communicating, the first thing is to look for opportunities to connect live, to keep people updated on things, and to constantly be checking in. The more you can do that live, the better. The more you can do that with video, the better. The other thing is you're going to have to communicate now in writing even more than you have in the past, and probably even more than you might be sitting here thinking you have to. I recommend that communicating in writing, that helps to clarify things, helps to put things out there. We're all trying to process a lot of information. So the more information you can put in writing and give people the time to absorb, the better. I think it is helpful to post information to shared locations so people can access that information as they need to. Sending more emails. I know that a lot of us are in organizations where we feel like we're getting too many emails. When working remotely, that is a really important communication avenue. So even if you think that you have sent too many emails, and even if you think your employees are tired of hearing it, they're probably not, and you probably haven't communicated enough. So more is better. Remember that people, including ourselves, are feeling isolated, we're feeling anxious, and, you know, over communicating in general, and then specifically about expectations for people's work can help eliminate some of these feelings of isolation, some of this anxiousness we are feeling about what we should be doing, how we should be doing it, when we should be doing it. So more than anything else, if you are thinking of communicating, communicate. So to bring that all back together, just to summarize, 6 ways that you can set expectations for remote employees is first to talk with each employee individually as much as possible and understand their situation and try to address your expectations to their individual needs. Second is to make sure when working, since we have remote teams, that you are clearly defining expectations for your employees' availability and response. Number 3 is to establish regular check-ins, both check-ins live as well as processes for other types of check-ins, such as written check-ins or providing reports and those kinds of things. Number 4, remember that there are still consequences for not meeting expectations, and to continue to use existing performance management approaches and to clearly set expectations for performances as well as the consequences for not meeting those expectations. Number 5 is to think about delivery expectations and work collaboratively with your teams to realistically assess those and set those expectations. And then 6, and as I stressed, most importantly, make sure that you over-communicate. So I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and I want to, leave you with a reminder that as managers, setting expectations is an important part of our jobs, regardless of where you and your employees are located. When managing remotely, and especially when managing remote workers, this is even more important. Setting expectations collaboratively, looking at the specific situation of your team, and over-communicating these expectations to everyone touched by them can make a huge difference in the transition to remote work. Most times, success comes from simply setting and communicating realistic expectations and then delivering them on them. So thanks again for your time. I hope you found this helpful.
Thank you, Marcy. We have a couple of questions that have come in during the session. One was asking, should the employees' start and end times be any different at home than what was expected before when everyone was working in the office? And if so, why would that be?
It would depend on your organization. In some organizations, they likely cannot be, especially if you're aligning with business operation hours. But in some cases, your employees may need that flexibility. So I would say that it's really up to the organization that you work for and how you do it, and what your employee situations are. That's why I find doing that calendar helpful, because in situations like this where you need to keep where you need to accommodate working hours, you may be able to find some ways to do that within the flexibility of different members of your team.
Okay, thank you. And we actually have a number of people asking if you could repeat the 5 items that you include in the weekly written update.
I can. So let me just pull those up so I make sure I say them correctly. So the first thing is I ask them to list what have you done this week. The second question is asking them, what are you planning to do next week? The third thing is, what challenges have you experienced this week or are you experiencing? The fourth one is, what can I do to help you? And then the fifth thing is, please tell me something you'd like to celebrate this week. And usually I have my team members will talk about things they've accomplished or things other people have helped them with or something like that.
That's great. I'm sure it helps to keep, the mood a little bit lighter when you let people focus on the things to celebrate about as well. So with that, I am going to say that we are at time now. So I want to thank you, Marcy, for sharing your insight into this topic. I know it's very helpful and more relevant now than ever before. And I want to thank you to everyone who joined us today. Please be sure to check our website at www.cpshr.us/about/events/webinars for the slide deck and recording. They should be available on the website within about 1 business day. And so I want to thank you all very much. Goodbye.